It's like Alexa, you ask it a question because you
And the other benefits are always
Work.
Good evening. The hour is 6 p.m. Having arrived, I'll call to order this regular meeting of the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel. The video is also posted on the city website by the end of the next business day. Barring any technical difficulties, copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets just as you enter the meeting room. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes has had a chance to speak. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room, identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. We had nobody calling in, so I don't have to do that part. So we'll call to order the special meeting of the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee, declare a quorum present. With that, some items on the agenda starts with Police Department. We now have 4 people here.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Steve Stewart. I'm a captain with the Police Department. I'm here to talk to you about a couple of relatively simple things, I hope, tonight. The first of which is the recommendation to accept federal forfeiture monies. These monies were seized in conjunction with a drug investigation that our department conducted jointly with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Investigations. And the amount for that is $22,404.45.
Okay, any members of the committee have questions? There are no other counselors here and no members of the public, but anybody wishes to speak, please raise your hand. If there are no questions, got to get a motion?
Yep. Move to recommend the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept and expend federal forfeiture monies in the amount of $22,404.45.
And I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Unanimous.
All right. So thank you. The second item is the recommendation to accept the U.S. Department of Justice Assistance Grant, and that's in the amount of $5,554. And so we co-apply with Cheshire County on this grant, and the monies are basically split in half. What this one does is it allows us to field iPhones in our police cars and a couple within our detective unit. And we've been doing this for, 4 or 5 years now, and it's really increased our efficiency in terms of being able to get in touch with people, victims, witnesses, allows us to take pictures more quickly on the scene, videos, that sort of thing.
Questions from members of the committee? Anybody else have a question? Seeing none, we'll get a motion.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to co-apply with the County of Cheshire and to accept and expend the U.S. Department of Justice fiscal year 22 JAG in the amount allocated to the city of $5,554.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guess it's your turn.
Yes. Good evening, Assistant City Manager, HR Director Beth Fox. I am here this evening seeking authorization for the City Manager to do all things necessary to enter into a contribution assurance agreement, or known as a CAP agreement, with the city's workers' compensation carrier, Primex, through the calendar year 2025. The CAP agreement will provide the city with some protection against premium increases, mitigating the impact, or potentially mitigating the impacts of losses on future contributions. We have participated in this CAP program since 2012 and have benefited from it in past years as our loss ratio may adjust and sometimes occasionally require larger increases in contribution because our experience may not be as favorable during different rating periods. So this, again, would provide us protection from and limit rate increases to the amount of 6%, and is benefited us in the past and is recommended to be continued.
Questions from members of the committee? No other counselors, no other? If not, motion.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute an agreement extending participation with Prime X3 in a multi-year contribution assurance program capped through calendar year 2025, providing for mitigation in the event of adverse experience and assurance of predictable contributions for future workers' compensation insurance.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded. Further discussion, members of the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone opposed? No one's opposed. Unanimous. Thank you. Airport.
Good evening, everyone. Dave Hickling, Airport Director. What we have here is a request from Thomas Transportation to lease some parking spaces at the airport. This is similar, or pretty much the same lease that they had in the past. They had asked to terminate that lease when COVID made it so they couldn't really operate their business. So they're just coming back, asking to do a new lease for the same thing, about 40 spots. Plenty of space at the airport to accommodate them, and it's some additional revenue for the airport.
Questions? If not, motion, please.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a lease with Thomas Transportation for a portion of the airport terminal parking lot for parking of their customers' vehicles.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next agenda item we have is an agreement with McFarland Johnson. On our CIP is a project to construct a perimeter fence to keep wildlife off the runway. We're finally getting that project, and we've got a scope of work and a cost for McFarland Johnson to start that. It'll be a preliminary design, about 30% of the design work, but it's really focused on the environmental assessment. There'll be a wetland delineation done with that. We'll have a company come in and do a wildlife assessment. So a lot of the preliminary stuff we'll need to complete the design is involved in this project. This is funded, it is AIP fundable through the FAA, so we'll be looking for a grant to cover 90% of that cost. 5% will be a state grant, and then we will be covering 5% of that.
Questions, members of the committee? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just more of a comment. I know that there are some members on the Conservation Commission who are very interested in this project. If you could just keep the Concom appraised of
Right.
the environmental assessment.
So the scope of work actually includes 2 meetings each with both the Keene and the Swansea Conservation Commissions to keep them updated. We'll also send them any meeting minutes and keep them involved with what's going on.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion? In that case, motion.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a professional engineering services contract with McFarland Johnson for the preliminary design and environmental assessment for the airport wildlife perimeter fence project.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Just one comment. I just did some quick math. I think the background notes have a typo. The 167,310 is just the federal, I would guess,
Right.
just based on doing the math. And then the state would be another 9295, which isn't listed in there. So I think that there's just a gap. So it doesn't affect what our portion from how I'm doing the math. I just think the state portion is not included. Just for the background. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. We had the motion. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Andy Bohannon, Parks Recreation Facilities Director. Before you tonight is the opportunity to have the city manager execute a professional service contract with Spawn Ranch, who has, for the design build services for a new skate park, not to exceed $225,000, which is our current budget within the CIP. A few years ago, this project kind of got kicked off with fundraising effort. The city council put $25,000 in the CIP to help fund and give a commitment for some of the larger donors, which came forward after that commitment from the city. They went out, they've raised $200,000 prior to COVID, and they presented that to the city council last fall for the purposes of the design services to move this project along. And for one reason or another, it was delayed. And so, but Spawn Ranch, we did put it out to bid. They were the only bidders. If you're familiar with following this project, Spawn Ranch has actually been a part of this project since, I think, 2014, where they came in, did some initial renderings for us out at Wheelock Park. So they've been following us. They know us well. We did send it out to all of the designers that we had on file from that particular round. So it went out to quite a few folks. And so I was pleased to see that Spawn Ranch kept tabs and worked with us. And I think they're going to provide quality design for our skaters. And I think many people around the community, if this were to pass, are going to be very happy to begin that design element and kick off the construction for next year.
Any discussion?
I like the idea of going right to design to build. I'm curious, can we get when the design portion is done, can we get like a presentation and just to see all that? Doesn't need to be part of it.
Absolutely,
Cool.
yes.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Get a motion, please?
Oh, we're on the wrong page. Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a professional service contract with Spawn Ranch, Inc. for design build services required for the creation of a new skate park for an amount not to exceed $225,000, with funding to come from Project Cost Center 90317.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, members of the committee? Seeing none. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Don Lucier, City Engineer. Hopefully, I don't get run out of town for suggesting this, but as we kick off the Winchester Street reconstruction project, and that project is now fully underway, I'm here to talk to you about the next one on the horizon, which will be the Lower Winchester Street reconstruction project. Basically extending the work we're doing this summer from the roundabout at 101 all the way down to the Swansea town line and actually a little bit further. So like the Upper Winchester or Winchester Street project that's currently under construction, this one is participating through the state with federal highway money. It's funded under the Fixing Fixing America's Surface Transportation System Act, or the FAST Act. I just love the acronyms. So under that program, the federal government through DOT pays for 80% of eligible project costs. We're responsible for the 20% local share. We manage it, we hire the consultants, we oversee the work, and they reimburse us for the costs after we pay them. This project is a little unique. Actually, back I think in January or February, I was asking the council for authorization to enter into a three-party agreement with the DOT and the town of Swansea. That's all been done now, but because the town of Swansea and Southwest Regional Planning Agency expressed an interest in extending the scope of our project a little bit into Swansea to pick up some pedestrian amenities specifically and tie the cross-section of the roadway into Route 12 further south, Route 10. They asked us to, work with Swansea on that, and we've made an arrangement to do that. So Swansea will be part of this project. They will participate in the public presentations and the steering committee at some point, and we're looking forward to moving forward with it. One of the caveats of the funding source is we are required to use what's called a qualifications-based selection process. Essentially, it breaks down the hiring of your engineering consultants into two steps. First, you ask them for their qualifications, and you select from the field the most qualified firm to do the work. And once you've selected the most qualified firm, then you negotiate a scope of work and a fee for the project specifically. And that's just the way that the federal government requires engineering services. Architectural services are also hired the same way. So we went through that process. 4 firms submitted their qualifications for this project. It was a good turnout. We selected 2 of those firms to be interviewed by the selection team. And at the end, we selected McFarland Johnson as the preferred candidate for the work. Obviously, McFarland Johnson, I think, went into this with, a little bit of a leg up, just having done really good work for us on the Upper Winchester Street project, and helping us see that finally to completion. And we're very pleased with the work that they did. I will say that the other firms were all very well qualified. CHA certainly brought their A game to the interview. They clearly, were very interested in working with the city, and we appreciate their efforts and the effort that they put into preparing a good proposal for us. But we are recommending that we hire McFarland Johnson for the project, and specifically that you authorize the city manager to execute an engineering services contract for up to $480,000. Now, this contract will be the first of a couple. This one will take us through what's called the engineering study phase. Essentially, it does the geotechnical investigation, all of the environmental studies. It evaluates all the proposed alternatives or potential alternatives. It works with the community to select a preferred alternative for eventually designing and building. At the end of this, we basically know what we're going to build, that it can be built, and that it can survive the environmental and permitting regulatory process. So we decided to end the contract at that point, and then have a second contract once we know exactly what they're designing, the number of properties that we're going to be potentially impacting and have to negotiate with. All those sort of things will be determined through the study phase, and then they can give us a much more accurate estimate of the work for the next phase. But we will be back. Take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that here it includes public engagement in that, but
Yes.
I know there's going to be a lot of very passionate people in that section of town, both residents on the side streets that go off of it, as well as the businesses right there, and the businesses off the side streets. I don't know how to quantify it, but I'm trying to understand, is that public engagement plan, is that like one meeting that if they miss the public session, or is this like we're going business to business?
No, so we have a pretty extensive public participation plan for this project. I think altogether there's going to be a total of 7 public meetings. Initially, there will be a listening session. That's one of the requirements of the program. We're actually going to be doing 2 of those, one in Keene and one in Swansea, to make sure we're spreading out the geography a little bit. We're going to be doing something we did with the previous project. It's called an every door direct mail. It's kind of like a postcard that we can mail. The benefit of that product at the Postal Service is it lets us get to the actual tenants of the buildings. There's not a lot of residential in this area, but there are some multifamily housing down there, and the only way to really effectively get to the tenants and let them know about it is to use that Every Door product. So we'll be doing that. Once we do the listening session, we are planning and hoping that the mayor is going to appoint a steering committee to help guide this project. That steering committee will be comprised of members, made up of business owners and residents from the area, and kind of a cross section. All of those are public meetings and open to the public. We will be setting up a website and a project-specific mailing list for the project, so people that are interested, and I know that there's going to be some people interested in this project, will be able to kind of keep their finger on the pulse. We'll use that email list to remind people, hey, there's a steering committee meeting, tomorrow night at City Hall, that sort of thing. And then once we kind of get further along, the steering committee is going to be responsible for ultimately making a recommendation back to the council on which of the different alternatives for intersection treatments, sidewalk locations, how many lanes we need, that sort of thing. They're going to make that package of recommendations back to the council. Again, that'll be advertised in advance so that people will hopefully come out to that meeting and provide their input directly to the council.
Thank you, and that does sound great. If there's a way for people to submit online feedback and
Yes.
things like that, similar to what we're doing for this
Yep,
project, that would
absolutely.
be awesome. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, somebody's got a motion.
I think it's me. Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute an engineering and technical services agreement with McFarland Johnson, Inc. for the Lower Winchester Street reconstruction project for an amount not to exceed $480,000.
And I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, members of the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? No one opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last item on your agenda tonight is for Thompson Road. You may recall a few months back, we came and requested some funding for this work. Since then, we've put out an RFP. This is a request for proposals where, since we're spending our own money, we are allowed to use our own process, and price is one of the factors that we consider. I will say on that note that we don't always recommend the low-cost vendor for engineering service work. In this case, we had two very well-qualified proposals that we received, but one of them was substantially less than the other. And the reason for that predominantly is it's the company that's already done the geotechnical investigation and preliminary alternatives analysis for us, in previous work. So they're going in kind of with a little bit of background knowledge that the other firm would have to kind of redevelop. And I think that's a big part of the reason why they were able to come in at substantially less cost. Normally, once we get the proposals, we'll review them. The team will what we call shortlist a number of consultants to interview and kind of probe a little bit deeper. In this particular case, given the disparity between the prices and the fact that we knew that we already had worked with the one firm and were happy with their work, we didn't think frankly, it was fair to the other consultant to ask them to put in a lot of effort into preparing for a presentation when they probably weren't going to be able to overcome that price hurdle. So we elected not to do interviews, but we selected them based on the review of the proposals. And we are recommending that you authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with John Turner Consulting, Inc., in an amount not to exceed $60,000.
Questions? About a motion?
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute an engineering and technical services agreement with John Turn Consulting, Inc. for the Thompson Road Repair and Stabilization Project for an amount not to exceed $60,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor? No one opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
If you don't mind, hot off the presses. Today, we made a decision that unfortunately it's going to be necessary to close the revenue office on the next 2 Wednesdays. We are in the midst of a financial software transition, and it is requiring a lot of duplicate entry. We may need to close more than just the next 2 weeks, but for now, we're going to close the next 2 Wednesdays, and that is our slowest day in the revenue office. Tomorrow, we're going to blitz a lot of information and social media to try and get it out there, to let people know in advance and to ask them to take advantage of our online options. But since it's the Finance Committee, I thought I could share it with you this evening, and we will send out a message that will go to all counselors tomorrow.
Do we have other resources, other individuals within the
Yeah.
city of Keene that can help with clerical work?
Yeah, so this is a very tough project because you have to, there's 2 things. To be able to register vehicles, you have to be certified through the state of New Hampshire. So the people who are doing that, it's not like we could move one person down and ask someone else to do it for them. We have had administrative help across the organization for things like folding and sending out letters and things that, for the tax bills, things that other people could help with, but the actual reconciliation and some of this entry is stuff that we really need only certain people who are qualified to do that, and so they're going to need the time to be able to do the double entry and the reconciliation, because we're setting up an entire new system, new chart of accounts. We're setting up what the reconciliation process is going to look like for the future. And the finance department has, they have been under the gun for several months now, doing a lot of this initial work. And in July, when we rolled out the new tax program, we attempted to just start doing billing in that tax program and transition over the online, but it is proving to be a lot of work. In addition to that, we have changes. So we're short-staffed in that office. We have our tax collector, who's been here for 29 years or something like that, is retiring on the 22nd of July, and we are trying to train at the same time a brand new tax collector. There's been transitions in the office. We've lost part-time people. It's just been really, really tough. And unfortunately, I wish I could tell you that, in 2 weeks it's going to be better. It's not. This transition over the next year is going to be difficult, and it's going to move from one function to the next. And so, right now, we're in the revenue office, and we're focused on taxes and motor vehicles, but then we'll move to water and sewer at some point, and we're going to move to payroll at some point, and each step along the way is going to be difficult. And, we have small departments, and we really rely on them, and they're very busy departments, and we cross-train as much as we can, but there's just so many hours in a day. So for the next 2 weeks on Wednesday, revenue office will be closed, and potentially more in the future, but I'll keep you posted.
Thank you. Adjourned.